What's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Inside of today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the balance changes I think need to happen inside of Brawl Stars at the moment. So these will be about 5 buffs and about 5 nerfs, which I think need to immediately happen. So before we get into today's video, make sure you're using a creator code and mine would be greatly appreciated. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Alright guys, so we're going to be starting off the video with the buffs. So first and foremost, I think Squeak is in need of a buff. So at first, everyone thought that Squeak was going to be really broken. I thought he was going to be fairly decent and at least around the top 10 in the meta. But as time's gone on, as I've scrimmed a lot with Squeak in play, he really is an underwhelming brawler. I would say right now he probably is in and around probably like the middle of the pack, probably around 25th in the list in terms of how strong brawlers are. Right now, he's just not in a great spot. It's just really hard to consistently hit shots. Although he has really good zoning, and it can be really annoying for the enemy team to push into those shots. He's got really slow reload speed. His super is really hard to hit, and especially with his new style power, it never seems like you actually hit anyone with that super. So for me, I'll suggest a couple of buffs for Squeak. I don't want to make him too annoying because with his mechanics, you can think of it like Tick. He's just going to be super toxic. So you got to bear that in mind. But for me, I would probably either decrease his reload speed, so obviously making him zone a lot more, which, as I said, I don't want to be buffing too much because that could be a little bit too toxic. Also, the delay of the shot for the actual damage to come out, there probably needs to be a bit of a smaller delay on that, and maybe even a small increase in his range. Alright guys, moving on to the next buff, which I think needs to happen inside of Brawl Stars. Unfortunately, it's going to be Mr. P, so I know you're probably thinking, well, Mr. P's only just came out of meta. You hate Mr. P. A lot of people just hate Mr. P in the meta, but right now, I think he's a little bit too underwhelming, so I don't want to make him too toxic again, because when Mr. P is meta, it can be really frustrating, especially with all those porters. So maybe I'll consider a nerf to his porters in some way, maybe nerf the HP on the porters a little bit more, and then buff his damage or HP or something like that, because right now he just isn't used in competitive whatsoever. Maybe he might get some indirect buffs if other brawlers get the nerfs, like the Max, the Jeans. If they start to get a little bit of a nerf, and Mr. P might see a little bit more viability, but just overall, he's just not used at all inside of competitive, literally inside of every single game mode. I don't think I've ever seen him, so it definitely is one of the worst brawlers in the game right now, so he's in need of a little bit of love. Okay, so jumping into the next brawler, which should be buffed, is Brock. So I always talk about Brock being buffed. He did get a damage buff in the last set of balance changes, but still, he's really weak in the meta. One of the worst brawlers in the game right now, and it's mainly due to the fact of his health, and probably his shots are really hard to hit. So I don't know how you would actually change that mechanic, because Brock, overall, in past metas, it wasn't a problem for him for his rockets that should be really hard to consistently hit. But as time has gone on, a lot of new brawlers like Bell, like Byron, the longer range brawlers just have better long range mechanics. They're much easier to hit than Brock's, and he's just fell down in the rankings in the sharpshooter meta. So for me, for Brock, I don't want to make his damage too much, because else his gadget can be really broken. His big rocket can be really frustrating to face off against, especially because you got 3 of them. A lot of times you could just shoot a person once and just rocket them. It can be really frustrating. You can't really dodge it. So I don't really want the meta to revolve around his gadget. I want him to get a little bit more HP. So the reason is he's not meta is because he's squishy. He's got 3,360 HP. That is super low. A lot of the times you're not going to be able to win lane because he's just far too squishy. So I think a nice HP buff will more than likely make him better. Alright guys, so jumping into the next brawler, which I believe it needs a buff in the next balance changes, which may be a bit controversial or maybe a bit biased with this one, because I do like Rico a lot. But I just think Rico hasn't been meta for such a long time. He's meta on a few maps like Hot Potato and Harder on Mine, where he can be fairly decent on. But I would just love a Rico meta. We've not seen Rico become meta in forever. Literally since the beta days, Rico used to be a god back in beta. But ever since global launch, he's just never been a meta surrounding him. He used to be really good in heist, but right now just not in the best spot. And I would just love to see Rico get a little bit more love. Maybe he gets a good second gadget. Maybe he just gets a little bit more damage, a little bit more HP. Something needs to be done to make him meta. As I said, I just want to see him meta. We've seen a cult meta. We've seen all these different brawlers, which were just trash, just become meta. And Rico hasn't had that time to shine. So it may be a bit of a controversial opinion, but I feel like he needs a bit of love to make him meta. Alright guys, moving on to the final brawler, which I believe needs to have a buff inside of the game right now. It is Lou. So I know I've made him one of the most underrated brawlers in the game, but still I feel like Lou is a bit too lackluster, mainly just because of his main shooting mechanics. I stress this a lot of the time because it's just too frustrating to actually hit shots. It can be really rewarding if you do manage to hit your shots, but overall, there's just a lot of different brawlers that have much easier shots to land, and that's just going to provide a lot more value over time, and it can just be really hard for him as a mid or a lane to actually just hit shots. And that might sound dumb, but it's 3 snow cones just isn't like a good mechanic to have. Maybe make it so you have 4 snow cones and then lessen damage on every single attack. But yeah, Lou, it still feels a little bit too underwhelming for me, and I think this mechanic change would definitely make him better. Alright guys, now moving it on to the nerfs, and first starting off with Max. I feel like Max is the brawler that deserves a nerf the most out of everyone in the game right now. Even though she might not be one-on-one the strongest brawler in the game right now, her synergies, her viability, she just isn't, well, you just can't counter it in the game right now. It's just way too strong. She's too strong in too many different synergies right now. Literally every single brawler synergizes with Max, and it's mainly due to her star power, which automatically charges up every single time you move. I feel like this needs to get a nerf. As I said, it's just too many synergies in the game right now revolving Max, and it's a bit too toxic because Max, it just counters too many different brawlers, the likes of the sharpshooters. That speed just completely wrecks them. There's not a lot of Piper in the meta nowadays, and it's mainly just due to this brawler, and especially like the Gene Max combination. You know, it's always been decent in the meta. It's always quite viable, but right now it's super toxic. She's just been meta for way too long now, and definitely deserving of a nerf. Okay, so next up on the nerf list is my boy Gene, and I know it's painful to say that he deserves a nerf, but he really does. I feel like still the main reason why he is meta is because of the Max synergy. It's just way too good. Max speed, Gene pool, there's nothing that a lot of brawlers can do in the game. It just basically counters everything in the game right now. So Gene, I feel like, is deserving of a nerf, less so than Max. Definitely only nerf small things about him. Maybe nerf his magic puff star power a little bit. Maybe nerf the damage that he gives out. Like 1.5k is a lot of damage, especially that's like 4.5k in 3 shots. That can 3 shot so many different brawlers in the game. So something definitely needs to change about Gene, but I don't think too much because I don't think he's as strong without the Max synergy. Alright guys, so moving on to the next nerf, which I believe needs to happen, is going to be with Tick. And I know he's not completely the strongest brawler in the meta right now. I just feel like he has way too many mechanics, which just makes him too strong to the assassin type brawlers. So for me, I feel like he cycles his head a little bit too much, like 6 shots, like basically all of the time inside of bounty, inside of Brawl maps, which he's really strong on. He's just always cycling his head. It's super toxic. It can be really frustrating for the aggro brawlers. I feel like they should need to nerf that a little bit, maybe make it 7 shots to get his super or something like that. Just a small change. And also his gadget is just way too broken. It provides way too much value inside of a game right now. I just don't think there should be a gadget as strong as this. It deals 1k damage, it pushes him back, it makes him vulnerable for 1 second. You can see how good it is on maps like Shooting Star. You can tank so many different features about it. I just think it's too broken. I don't know how you would actually nerf this, but there's a couple of ways they could actually go about it, but it's just way too strong for me. And Tick, yeah, as I said, he's just too invulnerable to those aggro players. Right guys, so next up on the nerf list again, it is going to be Crow. So the main reason why I want Crow to be nerfed is because of his gadget. His gadget is just way too strong. I've probably mentioned this a few times already, so I won't go too much into it. The 5 second slow is just way too toxic. It just offers too much value. 5 seconds is such a long time. It should definitely nerf it to around 4 seconds or 3.5 seconds. And again, it's just way too good, especially on those longer range of maps like Bot Drop, like Factory Rush, like Backyard Bowl as well. He's just way too good down the lane, slowing people. You're just going to get a free kill every single time. It's definitely deserving of a nerf. Alright guys, now moving on to the next nerf, and I know Cole literally has only just became meta. I don't think it should be nerfed too much because there are a lot of counters to Cole and it can be a pretty healthy meta. I just feel like his gadget needs a bit of a nerf, and the main reason for this is because of game modes like Siege. So maybe it needs to be like some form of balancing around Siege. If you see it in competitive at the moment, a lot of times in Siege, the first robot can literally rely on the first spawn. So if basically Cole is in every single Siege comp, if the enemy Cole has a better spawn closer to the first bolt, they're going to be able to get the first robot for the majority of the time. And it's mainly because of Cole's gadget, because it allows you to get to that bolt so quickly. So I feel like it's in need of a little nerf. I don't know how they'll go about this, but I think that's the only thing that's really toxic about Cole. Alright guys, now moving on to the last set of nerfs, which I believe need to happen inside of the game right now. It's going to be pretty obvious. It's Stu and Bell. Stu and Bell are the best 2 brawlers in the game right now. They're just so good in 1v1 interactions. So starting off with Stu, I just feel like, again, in every single 1v1 interaction, it's just way too toxic. The knockback feature, just being able to burst down enemies, especially if you combine this with the gas to heal star power, it's just way too toxic. So I think he probably deserves a couple of nerfs in a few different categories. So the first nerf I think needs to happen is his gas to heal star power. You just get so much healing, especially if you're just combining his supers over and over again. And the other nerf that could happen is just a nerf to his HP. He's obviously just going to get way too value. If he's if he has less HP, it's going to be easier to take and down, thus making it you have to make the decision whether you want to go in or not, because you're going to be quite squishy. So I think that we need to make that change with Stu. And then moving on to Bell quickly as well. Overall, her mechanics are just way too broken. Just being able to bounce her shots infinitely, no matter what, as long as someone's in range, is a little bit too toxic. So I think they should definitely change the range as to when the shots actually bounce, make it a little bit longer, so you have to be the activation of it, you have to be further away from your teammates, because as I said, it's just way too toxic. It can just cause so much havoc on the map. Bell just still is super strong. Alright guys, this is going to be the end of today's video. Let me know what you think of the balances in the comment section below. A lot of these can be repeated through several methods. I tried not to go too much on those brawlers because you might have already seen what I thought of those brawlers, but I'm hoping with the next set of balances, which should be pretty soon, I'm hoping the season is ending in like 11 days time, probably, I don't know, balance changes maybe in like a week or two's time, somewhere around there. Hopefully we can get some decent changes. But yeah, that's going to be it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.